Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
Welcome back to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt. You can listen on the radio at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays, 4:30 in the afternoon on Sundays. Podcasts anytime, anywhere, everywhere, or Facebook Live or YouTube. Go to YouTube, search for Talk Law Radio, and click subscribe. And if you want to know when new videos are posted there, click the little bell. The YouTube videos are a little bit different than the Facebook Live in that YouTube videos are about 10 minutes apiece, whereas you can watch the full 1-hour episode on Facebook Live without interruption, or you can listen on podcasts everywhere without interruption. So tell your friends about Talk Law Radio so they can be up to date on what's going on in the law. Today we're talking about the Texas R.E.A.D.E.R Act. It's a law that imposes a rating system on booksellers so that the booksellers will rate how sexually explicit the book's content are before school districts would be allowed to purchase those books. And the way I found out about this law is because there was a court case that was challenging the constitutionality of the law. It's known as Book People versus Martha Wong in her official capacity as the chair of the Texas Library and Archives Commission. There's other parties, but I'll just refer to it as the Book People case. There were some booksellers and book-selling associations involved in the plaintiff side of the case. They're challenging the constitutionality of the Texas law that requires this rating system. And my question to you, the listeners, is what do you think is more important? Do you think freedom of speech is more important, or do you think the regulation of books for the benefit of children is more important? You can call us here live at the station right now, Saturday, January 27th, 2024, by calling 210-308-8867, or you can text Todd at 538-4770, and I'll read your comment when I get a chance on the air. So I was telling you what some of my fan club had said about this law, and of course you can post on Facebook Live your comments as well. I've been trying to figure out how to use reels and stories on Facebook because that's where I could conduct a poll. I tried that for the law firm on a different issue on the Corporate Transparency Act, and my daughter Caitlin was able to help me a little bit with it. So if you see me experimenting with videos on social media, please forgive me if I make silly mistakes. I'm not really an expert yet, and I have a day job, so my time is limited to things like that. I just want to also mention that I'm going to be talking about another court case in the third segment when we usually talk about sinners and saints. And then at the end of the show, I'll be talking about a law that might impact you without you knowing it. So stay tuned for that. But now I want to talk more about the R.E.A.D.E.R Act, the Texas R.E.A.D.E.R Act, which is a law that requires booksellers to rate content, book content that is intended to be sold to kids, or not sold to kids, sold to libraries and school districts. And the reason this is important is because somebody did find books that were inappropriate. There was a letter posted on December 7th, 2021, by a school district superintendent. It says, last spring it came to my attention that some school district libraries contained at least one book that was wholly inappropriate due to its depiction of race. Another book was brought to my attention that contained graphic, vulgar language of a sexual nature. And you may have also heard about a letter from Representative Matt Krause, that's a Texas State Representative Matt Krause, asking school districts whether they had specific books. So I wanted to find this list, and it was kind of hard to find, but I did eventually find it. If you want a copy of Matt Krause's list of books, email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST at talklawradio.com. It's just interesting to see what some of these inappropriate books were. Let's go back to Book People case to find out more about what their challenges were and what the court held eventually. And if you want to speak up, if you're brave and have courage to say what you think about a rating system for books or about what you think kids should or shouldn't be reading, give us a call here at the radio station, 210-308-8867. The R.E.A.D.E.R Act was passed and signed by the governor, so this had support in the Texas legislature. Would you want your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter reading books at school that were sexually explicit? Or do you want the government to regulate that more to make sure that it doesn't happen? There's a couple of people that are members of my fan club that said they definitely don't want their children reading that kind of material, but it's not really the government's place to restrict ideas. That would seem to be a central theme, is we don't want the government controlling what we learn about because that power could be abused. But that power should be used by parents. Parents should know what their kids are reading. They should know what kind of content their kids are exposed to. And one of my buddies said, gosh, if they're not going to read about it in a book, they're probably just going to access the internet on their phone and find all kinds of inappropriate content that way. Yeah, but he didn't want the government to interfere. Okay, so the issue in this case wasn't book banning, which is a myth that I had to dispel for a lot of people. The issue in this Book People case that challenges the constitutionality of the law is whether the R.E.A.D.E.R Act vendor rating system is unconstitutional. To comply with the R.E.A.D.E.R Act, library material vendors may not sell library materials to a school district unless they have issued appropriate ratings for library materials they have previously sold to a school district or open enrollment charter school and that remain in active use by a district or a school. The Act requires vendors to give all library materials a rating of sexually explicit, sexually relevant, or no rating. And the court eventually, I'll spoil it for you, came up with the answer that this is unconstitutional because it's compelled speech. I bet you didn't know that that was part of the free speech clause, that we the people be free from government telling us what to say, whether it's in print or on the air or whether we're speaking it in a crowd. That would be compelled speech, we don't have to be compelled. That's part of our freedom of speech. So I wanted to read to you some of this opinion about the compelled speech standard. I need to have a better outline here to access that more easily. Okay, so the freedom of speech is the right of freedom of thought protected by the First Amendment against state action, which includes the right to speak freely and the right to refrain from speaking at all. Here, plaintiffs, the booksellers, want to remain silent and not express any public view on the appropriateness of various books. The exceptions to the compelled speech doctrine would be when the court recognized there's no right to refrain from speaking when essential operations of government require it for the preservation of an orderly society. The exception has been applied to sex offender registration requirements, disclosures on IRS forms, and demographic information for the census. But the R.E.A.D.E.R Act requires vendors to decide whether library materials are sexually explicit or sexually relevant according to guidelines that require the vendors to undertake a contextual analysis of material, weighing and balancing several factors. This goes beyond mere disclosure of demographic or similar factual information. So the court concluded that that exception didn't apply to the compelled speech part of our freedom of speech. And another argument that the state of Texas made was that this was commercial speech. And the court said commercial speech is an expression related solely to the economic interests of the speaker and its audience. It's also defined as speech which does no more than propose a commercial transaction. So this court said that it wasn't commercial speech. The ratings that the R.E.A.D.E.R Act required were neither factual nor uncontroversial. The statute requires vendors to undertake contextual analysis, weighing and balancing many factors to determine a rating for each book, balancing a myriad of factors that depend on community standards. And it's anything but disclosure of factual information, and it is controversial. So the court issued an injunction which stops the state of Texas from enforcing this rating system. So that's very interesting. It affects our children, our grandchildren, the children in the community. Those are the future decision makers of our society, and I realize that we need to protect them from material that's not helpful. But a lot of the listeners out there have been saying that that's up to the parents. The parents don't want them reading that book. They can complain to the school district. There was another court case cited inside that Book People case called PICO versus Board of Education. It discusses when school districts can make a decision about removing books, but we don't have time to go through that case right now. I have to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about sinners and saints. One sinner that should be applauded for his exceptionalism, and one self-proclaimed saint that should be charged with a crime. Stay tuned.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Each week, attorney Todd Marquardt talks about the law. His mission with the Talk Law radio show and podcast is to help you discover your legal issue blind spots. In the beginning, God had one law. Don't eat from the fruit of that tree. Then came the Ten Commandments. Now we have federal, state, and municipal lawmakers that won't stop creating new laws. Laws that might impact you without you knowing it. Listen to the show and drop a line on Facebook or email host@talklawradio.com and let the host know what you think of the show, the topics you want to hear, and whether you want to be a guest.